The German shepherd locked both forelegs around a drifting log and kept staring toward the far bank instead of safety. The former Navy SEAL stopped on the wooden bridge, knowing rescue crews could not reach the dog in time. Below him, broken branches slammed into the bridge supports as each cold wave pushed the dog's muzzle underwater. After he pulled her onto the planks, she rose, trembling, caught his sleeve gently, and turned back toward the river. His injured knee was failing, daylight was fading, and the only road across had already disappeared beneath a fallen oak. Then a faint puppy cry came from across the river, and the exhausted dog tugged his glove toward the dark trees. "Where are you watching from today? Stay with us until the end, then tell us what this story meant to you. Please like, share, and subscribe as we work toward welcoming our first 1,000 subscribers." Grant Callahan was 5 miles from his cabin in the mountains of Western Virginia when the old wooden bridge began to shudder beneath his truck. He was 56, a former Navy SEAL who now inspected rural bridges and drainage lines for the county. He had spent the day checking storm damage before dark. His notes were due on Marlene Boyd's desk the next morning. He wanted only to cross the river, reach home, and finish the report before the power went out. Then something black and gold rose between 2 waves below him. Grant braked hard. Through the rain-streaked windshield, he saw a German shepherd gripping a broken tree trunk with both front legs. The dog's head barely cleared the water. Each time the trunk spun, her muzzle disappeared, then surfaced again. The river was carrying her toward dark rocks downstream. Grant set the parking brake, switched on his hazard lights, and stepped into rain blowing almost sideways. His slate blue rain jacket covered a green camouflage field shirt and matching work trousers. His left knee tightened as soon as he turned toward the railing. He ignored the first stab of pain and studied the bridge. The railing was old pine, wet and weathered. It might stop someone from stumbling over the edge. It was not strong enough to trust with a life. Grant called 911. "Old Pike River Bridge, west approach," he told the dispatcher. "One large dog in the water. River is over the lower braces. Debris is striking the structure." She told him rescue crews were responding, but fallen trees were blocking 2 mountain roads. No arrival time could be promised. The trunk struck a submerged branch and rolled halfway over. The dog vanished. A second later, one ear broke the surface, then her whole head. She clawed back onto the trunk, more slowly this time. Waiting was a decision, too. Grant opened the rear equipment compartment. He had just left a culvert inspection site, so his gear was still with him. A flotation vest, a full-body work harness, static rope, wheel chocks, and a throw bag. None of it made the river safe. It only gave him better choices. He moved the truck square across the bridge, set the chocks, and clipped his main line to the rated tow receiver. A second line around a sound timber brace limited his sideways swing. He did not tie himself to the old railing. The dog drifted closer. She was a black and tan female with a narrow gold streak running down the left side of her forehead. Her right ear stood high. The tip of the left bent slightly backward. Her amber eyes fixed on the bridge, then on Grant. The trunk struck a lower crossbeam and stopped. Grant put on the vest and harness. Cold had stiffened his fingers, so he checked every buckle twice. Then he tied a wide rescue loop and climbed over the rail. His left boot found the outer edge of the deck. The angle sent a hard warning through his knee. Years earlier, he could have held that position without thinking. Now the joint trembled beneath him. He stopped, shortened the stabilizing line, and shifted his weight into the harness. The correction cost time but restored control. Below, the dog pressed her chest harder against the trunk. She did not bark or thrash. Grant lowered the loop. The first attempt washed across her shoulders and slipped away. He pulled it back. The trunk moved downstream. On the second try, he let the current carry the loop beneath her chest. When it rose on the far side, he pulled until the rope closed behind her front legs. The crossbeam groaned. The trunk broke free. The current swung the dog against the outside of the bridge. Grant's knee folded, and his shoulder struck the rail. Pain flashed through his leg. He did not yank the rope. He lowered a little line, allowing the water to turn her body parallel to the bridge. Then he drew her upward in short, controlled pulls. Her claws found the deck edge. Grant caught the loose skin over her shoulders and rolled backward over the railing. They landed together on the wet boards. For several seconds, neither moved. The German shepherd coughed river water onto the planks. Grant lay beside her, one hand still closed around the line, listening to the bridge shake as debris struck below. The dispatcher's voice came from inside his jacket. "Sir, are you still there? Dog is out of the water. Are you injured?" Grant tested his knee. It hurt, but it held. No serious injury. He cut the loop loose rather than forcing it over the dog's head. She tried to rise and collapsed against his leg. Grant placed a hand near her ribs and felt her rapid breathing. Easy. Mud darkened the gold fur along her chest. The bent tip of her left ear twitched whenever wood struck the bridge. Grant spread an emergency blanket over her back. His plan was simple. Put her in the warm cab, drive to the cabin, call the local veterinarian, finish the report later if the power stayed on. It was the kind of plan he trusted. One problem, one solution, everything kept within reach. The dog ruined it before he reached the passenger door. She lifted her head and stared toward the opposite bank. Then she struggled upright, slipped once, and limped back toward the railing. Grant caught the loose end of the line. No. She did not fight him. She took the cuff of his jacket gently between her teeth, held it for 1 second, and let go. Then she faced the far side again. Grant followed her gaze. Beyond the rain lay flooded brush, dark timber, and a narrow road climbing away from the river. The dog whined low in her throat. Grant drew her back from the edge. "You can't go into that water again." She pulled toward the opposite bank, stopped, and looked at him. Her body shook from cold and exhaustion, but she was not trying to return to the river. She wanted him to notice something beyond it. A gust flattened the rain for a moment. From somewhere on the far side came a thin cry. Grant froze. It came again, high, broken, and young. A puppy. The German shepherd answered with a short, breathless whine. Her eyes never left the opposite bank. Grant looked at his truck. The heater was running. His field notebook lay open on the passenger seat, the unfinished bridge report waiting beneath the dome light. Beyond the windshield, the road home curved into the trees. He had taken the immediate danger out of the river. No one could accuse him of walking away. The thought lasted only a second. Grant checked the county road map on his phone. The paved route toward the far bank was blocked by a mature oak lying from ditch to ditch. He could not move it with the truck, and the soaked shoulder dropped sharply toward the river. A narrow ranger trail left the county road half a mile behind him. It climbed the ridge and came down near the opposite bank. The map did not show its condition. Daylight was fading. His knee was swelling. The dog beside him had little strength left. He could return to the cabin and tell the dispatcher what he had heard. Rescue crews were coming, though no one knew when. Across the water, the puppy made one more weak sound. The German shepherd caught the edge of Grant's wet glove in her teeth and released it. Grant folded the map, looked at the blocked road, and then at the dog who had survived the river. Home would have to wait. Grant Callahan stood beside the blocked mountain road, while the German shepherd shivered against his leg. Behind them, the old bridge shook under the river's weight. Ahead, a fallen oak sealed the paved route to the opposite bank. Somewhere beyond the rain and trees, a puppy cried again. Grant raised his phone and called the dispatcher back. "I have a second dog," he said. "A puppy. Somewhere across the river. Main road is blocked by a full-size oak. The dispatcher asked whether he could remain at the bridge until rescuers arrived. Grant looked at the German Shepherd. She was staring toward the far bank, her chest rising too fast beneath the emergency blanket. "There's a ranger access trail west of here," he said. "It reaches the upper side of that property." There was a pause. "Do not attempt to cross moving water." "I won't." He gave the trail number, his truck description, and the direction he intended to take. Then he packed the wet rope, removed the wheel chocks, and eased the dog toward the passenger side. She resisted the open door at first. Her feet spread on the slick boards, and her eyes returned to the river. Grant lifted the blanket around her, rather than lifting her body. "The other way," he said. "We're going the other way." She could not understand the sentence, but she followed the movement of his hands. After one uncertain step, she climbed into the cab. Grant turned the heater toward the floor and placed the emergency blanket across the seat. The dog remained standing, braced against the turns, looking through the rear window as he drove away from the bridge. Every few hundred yards, she gave a low sound in her throat. "I hear you." The ranger trail appeared behind an unmarked steel gate left open for county access. It was little more than two muddy tire tracks rising between hardwood trees. Water ran down the center in a shallow brown stream. Grant shifted into four-wheel drive. He had inspected similar roads, but he did not know this one. He kept the truck below 15 miles an hour and stopped twice to check washouts before crossing them. Darkness gathered beneath the trees faster than it did on the open road. His left knee had begun to swell inside his wet trousers. His fingers were stiff enough that fastening the dog's temporary lead took 2 attempts. The trail ended on a high shoulder above the river. According to the county map, the old shed lay less than half a mile downhill. Grant packed a headlamp, flashlight, compact first aid kit, pry bar, and dry blanket into his field bag. He left the heavier rope gear in the truck. There was no reason to carry equipment he was too tired to use safely. The dog jumped down before he could guide her. Her legs nearly folded. Grant caught the lead and waited until she found her balance. "Slow is still moving." She pulled toward a narrow break in the trees. Her nose stayed low, reading the wet ground. Grant followed, placing each boot carefully among roots hidden by fallen leaves. The route descended sharply. Runoff moved through shallow channels on both sides, carrying twigs and red clay toward the river. The German Shepherd moved with purpose until the sound of water striking rock rose from below. She stopped. Grant almost walked into her. Her front legs stiffened. Her tail lowered and shifted slightly left. The bent tip of her left ear flattened as the river sounded through the trees. The puppy called again, faint but close enough now that Grant could tell it came from lower ground. He shortened the lead. "Come on." The dog dropped her chest nearer the mud. Grant pulled once. She planted all 4 feet. The puppy cried again. Daylight was fading, and the temperature was falling. Grant could imagine water spreading across a floor somewhere below. He could also feel time slipping away, while a frightened dog refused to move. He gave the lead a firmer pull. The German Shepherd began to pant. Instead of looking toward the puppy, she twisted her head back toward the truck. Grant stopped. His first instinct was to increase pressure. It was the instinct that had carried him through years of difficult work. Identify resistance, apply force, keep control. But the dog was no longer tracking anything. He had turned her fear into the largest fact in front of her. Grant let the lead go slack. He stepped uphill, placing himself between her and the loudest part of the river. Then he lowered himself carefully onto one knee. Pain ran up his thigh, but he stayed still. The dog watched him. Grant kept his eyes slightly to the side. "You know where the little one is." "I don't." Rain tapped against the hood of his jacket. For several seconds, nothing changed. Then the dog lifted her nose. She tested the air once, then again. Her breathing slowed. Instead of taking the direct slope toward the river, She turned left and moved along the hillside. Grant followed without tightening the line. The road added distance, but the sound of rushing water weakened behind a fold in the land. The dog began tracking again. She stopped at a broken fence, slipped beneath the lower rail, and looked back when Grant had to climb over. Beyond it stood an old storage shed with a sagging metal roof. Water flowed through the grass around its lower wall. Grant heard the puppy clearly now. The dog surged forward, but he kept enough tension on the lead to prevent her from charging through the open doorway. Part of the roof had dropped onto one corner. Inside, boards and garden tools had been pushed into a tangled pile. Grant aimed his flashlight across the floor. A German Shepherd puppy stood on a stack of lumber near the rear wall. It was small, perhaps 7 weeks old, with one ear partly raised and the other folded over. A pale gold mark showed on its chest. A fallen section of wire mesh blocked the space between the puppy and the doorway. Water covered the lowest part of the floor and continued to rise from a drainage channel behind the building. The adult dog whined and tried to force her muzzle through the mesh. The puppy answered and moved too close to the edge of the boards. One paw slipped. "Stay there," Grant said, though the words were for himself as much as the animal. He secured the adult dog's lead around a sound fence post outside the shed, leaving enough length for her to see the puppy. She pulled hard, but did not bite at the rope. Grant tested the floor with the pry bar before placing his weight on it. The first boards near the door were solid. The center section bowed under pressure. He moved along the wall. The wire panel had fallen from a storage rack. One corner was pinned beneath a timber too heavy to lift, safely from the wet floor. Grant wedged the pry bar under the opposite edge. His hands slipped. He wiped them on his trousers, changed his grip, and tried again. The panel rose 4 inches before the bar shifted. Grant caught it with his shoulder, and the sudden load sent pain through his knee. The puppy backed away from the sound. Outside, the mother barked once, sharp and urgent. "I know." Grant repositioned the bar against a thicker joist and lifted again. This time, the panel rose high enough for him to slide a short block of wood beneath it. He crawled under. The puppy pressed into the rear corner of the lumber stack. It did not come when Grant reached out. Its eyes moved between him and the mother outside. Grant turned his body sideways and placed the dry blanket on the boards between them. The mother whined. The puppy took one step toward the sound, then another. Grant waited until it reached the blanket before closing both hands gently around its body. It was cold, but alert. He wrapped it quickly and backed beneath the wire. The adult dog nearly pulled the fence post sideways when Grant emerged. He set the bundle on dry ground. She immediately pushed her nose beneath the blanket. She checked the puppy's left ear first, then its belly and legs. Only after the puppy gave a weak protest did she lie down beside it. Grant crouched in the rain and watched her place her body between the puppy and the shed. She had not led him there because she trusted him. She had led him because she had run out of other choices. He carried the puppy uphill inside the field bag, leaving the top open. The mother walked close enough that her shoulder brushed his leg. Twice, the sound of the river made her stop. Both times Grant waited without pulling. By the time they reached the truck, full darkness had fallen. At the cabin, Grant spread towels across the kitchen floor and called the nearest veterinary clinic. A woman named Dr. Helen Avery answered the emergency line. Her voice was calm and direct. "Do not place them against a heater," she told him. "Warm the room. Dry them slowly. Small amounts of water, not a full bowl." Grant followed every instruction. The mother kept the puppy between her front legs. Whenever Grant approached too quickly, she raised her head but did not growl. When he placed a shallow dish nearby, she waited until the puppy had taken a few laps before drinking herself. Helen called again 30 minutes later to check their breathing. The puppy had stopped trembling. The mother remained exhausted, but alert. A fallen tree kept the clinic road partly closed until morning. As soon as county crews cleared one lane, Grant drove both dogs in. Helen Avery met him at the side entrance. She was a lean woman in her early 60s, with short gray-brown hair tucked behind one ear and a sage-colored scrub top beneath a field jacket. She examined the puppy first because of its age, then listened to the mother's lungs. They were fortunate, she said. Cold, exhausted, and mildly dehydrated. I want to watch the mother for signs she inhaled water, but I'm not seeing a serious injury. While Helen entered the findings, Grant turned the mother's worn collar beneath the examination light. Mud had hidden most of the metal tag. Cleaned with gauze, the engraving became readable. Sadie. Helen looked at the puppy, then searched the clinic's records. "And this one is Toby," she said. The file listed an owner at the far end of Pike Valley. Raymond Pike. Helen reached for the telephone. Before dialing, she glanced at Grant. "When he gets here, stand where he can see your face," she said. "Ray misses more than people realize. If you speak from behind him, he may think you never answered at all." She placed the call. Grant looked through the glass door of the treatment room. Sadie lay with her body curved around Toby, her amber eyes still open. The rescue was over. What came next would depend on a man Grant had never met, and on whether Grant could listen before deciding what kind of man he was. By late morning, Grant Callahan was still at Helen Avery's veterinary clinic, waiting for Sadie and Toby to be cleared to leave. He had changed into a dry olive Henley and a worn canvas jacket, but his left knee remained swollen from the rescue at the bridge. Sadie rested behind the glass door of the treatment room, with Toby tucked against her front legs. Grant was studying the mud-darkened collar on the counter when the clinic's front door struck the wall. "Where are my dogs?" The man in the doorway was in his mid-70s, lean through the chest, but broad in the hands and wrists. Rain spotted his brown olive chore coat. A short gray mustache crossed a long, weathered face, and a pale hearing device curved behind his right ear. His voice filled the small reception area. Sadie's head came up at once. The man saw her through the glass. "Sadie." The dog's ears shifted back. Toby moved behind her foreleg. Grant stepped between the man and the treatment room door before he had fully considered the movement. "You're Raymond Pike. Who took them?" "I found them last night." Ray's eyes narrowed. "You left them out all night?" "No. I said I'd found them." "You said they were outside." Grant glanced at Helen. She had already come around the counter. "Mr. Pike, face this way." Ray turned toward her, irritated but obedient. Helen pointed at Grant. "One person at a time. Look at him when he speaks." Grant understood what she had warned him about. Ray had entered with his right side angled away. He had heard pieces and supplied the rest himself. Grant moved into the older man's line of sight. "I pulled Sadie out of the river," he said, keeping the sentence short. "Toby was trapped in the old shed below your property." Ray stared at him. For the first time, the anger in his face gave way to something less guarded. "The river?" "Yes." Ray looked through the glass again. "Let me take them home." "Not yet," Helen said. His shoulders tightened. "They're mine." "That is not in question." "Then open the door." Helen did not raise her voice. Sadie inhaled water. "I want to monitor her breathing for a few more hours. Toby is still mildly dehydrated." Ray shifted his attention from Helen to Grant, then back again. "He decide that?" "I did." The answer stopped him. Helen placed a consent form on the counter and turned it so he could read it. She explained the observation period, the estimated cost, and the signs she was watching for. Ray did not ask for charity or argue about the fee. He read every line before reaching for the pen. Grant watched him sign. The hand was steady. When Helen opened the treatment room door, Ray entered slowly. He called Sadie again, but his voice was still too loud. Sadie lowered her head. Grant felt the old judgment return almost before he could stop it. A dog did not fold itself that way without a reason. Ray took another step. Toby squeezed farther behind Sadie. "Back up," Grant said. Ray turned too late to catch the first word. "What?" "You're frightening them." The older man's jaw hardened. "You know that after one night?" "I know what I'm seeing." "No. You know what you decided." Grant moved closer to the doorway. "She nearly drowned because she was loose in a storm." Ray's face reddened. "You think I opened the gate for her?" "I think something at your place failed." "And now you think you own the answer." Helen stepped between them, not physically blocking either man but forcing both to look toward her. "Sadie spent hours listening to thunder, metal, breaking wood, and fast water," she said. "A loud voice may frighten her today. Without meaning, she fears the person speaking." Grant looked at the dog. Sadie was not watching Ray's hands. She was watching his face. Helen pointed to the stool beside the wall. "Mr. Pike, sit there." "Let her decide." Ray muttered something Grant could not hear, but he sat. Helen touched 2 fingers to her own lips, reminding him to keep his face visible. Ray looked at Sadie. When he spoke again, his voice was lower. "Come here, girl." He did not reach for her. Sadie remained where she was for several seconds. Then she stood, leaving Toby on the blanket. She crossed the floor carefully, smelled Ray's open hand, and sat beside his boot. Ray rested his palm against the side of her neck. He did not look at Grant. Sadie had not proven that everything at home was safe. She had proven only that fear was more complicated than Grant had allowed it to be. Toby followed a moment later and pressed his nose against Ray's trouser leg. Ray bent forward, and his expression tightened when he saw the pale mark on the puppy's chest. "You went after the feed sack again, didn't you?" Toby pulled on the edge of his bootlace. The anger in Ray's voice had disappeared. Grant stepped away from the door. Helen gave Sadie another brief examination, while Ray watched. When the dog coughed once, Ray leaned forward. "That normal?" "It can be after inhaling water," Helen said. "That is why she stays until this afternoon." Ray nodded, though he did not look pleased. Grant waited until they were back in the reception area. "I want to see the gate." Ray looked at him directly this time. "Why?" "To understand how it opened." "You work for animal control?" "No." "Sheriff?" "No." "Then you don't get to inspect my property." Grant felt the argument forming. The safest response seemed obvious. 2 dogs had escaped, 1 had nearly drowned, and the man responsible had arrived shouting. But Helen had already made one point clear. Grant's concern did not create authority. He changed the sentence. "If the gate is still damaged, Sadie and Toby could get out again when you bring them home. I have tools in my truck. I'm asking permission to look." Ray studied him for several seconds. "You always talk like a report?" "Usually." "That must make for quiet dinners." Grant did not answer. Ray took his cap from his coat pocket. "You can look. You don't touch anything until I say." The Pike property stood at the far end of a narrow valley road, above the low ground where Grant had found the shed. By early afternoon, the rain had weakened to a gray mist. Ray drove ahead in an old green pickup. Grant followed. The house was a 1-story frame building with a wide porch and a roof patched in 2 shades of metal. Nothing about the place suggested neglect. Firewood was stacked beneath cover. Tools hung in order along the side wall. The trouble was concentrated behind the house. One side of the dog enclosure leaned outward. The gate sagged from its upper hinge. Leaves and muddy branches filled the drainage ditch above it. Beneath a small awning, a portable generator stood with its cover removed and several parts arranged on a towel. Ray pointed to the gate. "Wind caught it when the power failed." "Where were the dogs?" "Sadie was in the run. Toby was with me near the back step." How did he reach the shed? Ray's eyes moved toward the low field. I had stored feed there before I moved it up to the house. The smell was still in the floorboards. When the generator stopped, I came under the awning to work on it. Toby slipped around the corner. By the time I noticed, Sadie had pushed through the loose gate. Grant examined the broken hinge, but did not touch it. The shed is downhill from here. Yes. And the shallow crossing is between here and there. It was shallow. Not last night. I know that now. The words came out hard, but Ray's gaze remained fixed on the field. Grant looked at the clogged ditch. Runoff had cut a fresh line through the grass toward the crossing. He could see how a route safe in ordinary rain might have changed within minutes. Why didn't you call anyone when they went missing? Ray tapped the device behind his ear. Power was out. Landline was down. That thing was giving me more squeal than sound. I drove as far as the oak across the road and came back. You could have asked a neighbor. Ray turned sharply. You came to see the gate. Grant held his gaze but said nothing. Ray looked away first. My wife handled the appointments for the hearing equipment. Batteries, adjustments, all of it. Grant waited. She died 2 years ago. The sentence had no softness around it. Ray picked up a wrench from this generator towel. People started calling to check whether I had eaten. Then, whether I had slept. Then, whether I should still be driving. After a while, every offer sounded like somebody measuring the rooms before I was gone. Grant looked again at the sagging gate. He understood the desire to keep other people from finding the weak places. He also understood what happened when maintenance was delayed long enough. The gate still has to be fixed, he said. I didn't say it didn't. Grant brought his tool bag from the truck. The upper hinge had torn loose from softened wood. He chose a new position on the same post, marked the holes, and began driving longer screws. Ray stood nearby with his arms crossed. You're putting the load on the wrong side. Grant kept working. The post is solid here. The post is solid. The angle is wrong. I'm moving the hinge away from the split and turning the gate into a sail. Grant tightened the final screw. Ray pointed toward the western ridge. Wind comes down that gap and hits this yard sideways. Always has. Grant lifted the gate and tested the swing. It closed cleanly. There. Ray did not move. Wait. A gust came down the valley. The gate caught it broadside. The new hinge held, but the bottom edge twisted outward. The latch missed its plate by nearly 2 inches. Grant tried again. The gate struck the post and bounced back. Ray picked up the small aluminum slope gauge from his coat pocket. Red tape was wrapped around one end. He laid it across the gate frame, then looked at Grant. Strong parts still fail, he said, when the force is coming from the direction you refuse to measure. Grant stared at the screws he had just installed. For the second time in less than a day, he had mistaken control for understanding. The new hinge held, but the gate no longer met the latch. Grant stood in Ray Pike's muddy yard and tested it a second time. The bottom corner struck the post, bounced back, and left a clean mark in the wet wood. Behind him, Ray balanced a short aluminum slope gauge across one palm. Red tape wrapped one end. You measured the post, Ray said. You didn't measure the wind. Grant looked toward the narrow gap between the western ridges. The gust had come through that opening and hit the broad face of the gate at an angle. He removed his gloves. What would you change? Ray's eyebrows lifted slightly. It wasn't an apology, but it was the first question Grant had asked him since arriving that did not already contain its own answer. Move the hinges to the other post, Ray said. Set the latch deeper. Brace the lower corner toward the house. That puts the opening on the opposite side. That is the point. Grant examined the enclosure again. The current gate opened toward the slope, where runoff softened the ground after heavy rain. Reversing it would place the entrance on the higher, firmer side. He picked up the drill. Ray stopped him with one raised hand. First, we replace that upright. The post is still solid. The top is. Push the base. Grant planted one boot against it and leaned. The post shifted half an inch in the mud. He felt the answer before Ray spoke. Strong enough for a quiet day, the older man said. Not for the next storm. They worked without much conversation at first. Grant dug out the softened post and lifted a treated timber from a stack beside the shed. Ray marked the depth with a carpenter's pencil, then checked the ground angle with his small gauge. Grant handled the weight. Ray chose the position. The arrangement was not graceful. Ray disliked repeating instructions, and Grant disliked being watched while he corrected work he had already completed. Twice, Ray told him the brace was a quarter-inch off. The second time, Grant nearly argued. Then he checked. Ray was right. You always carry that thing? Grant asked, nodding toward the slope gauge. Since 1989. That old? The tool or me? Grant looked at him. Ray's mouth moved beneath his gray mustache. It took Grant a moment to realize the man was almost smiling. They set the new post, moved the hinges, and added a diagonal brace. When the gate finally swung shut, it met the latch without lifting or twisting. Ray leaned his shoulder against the outer edge, while Grant watched the hardware. Nothing moved. Again, Ray said. Grant opened it fully, waited for a gust, then released it. The gate swung with the wind, but stopped against the brace before the hinges took the full load. This time, Ray nodded. Grant packed the drill but left the shovel out. You did road work? Ray bent to collect the discarded screws. Army engineers first, then county roads. How long? 28 years. Grant glanced toward the ditch above the enclosure. Here in Pike Valley? Most of it. Ray dropped the screws into an old coffee can. Culverts, washouts, retaining walls. Whatever failed after people said it would hold another season. There was no pride in the statement, only memory sharpened by repetition. Grant understood why Ray had noticed the wind before he had. The man had spent decades studying what pressure did after everyone else stopped looking. A truck horn sounded from the driveway. Helen Avery had arrived in the clinic van with Sadie and Toby. She stepped out wearing a field jacket over her sage-colored scrubs, then opened the side door. Toby came forward first, all oversized paws and uncertain ears. Sadie remained behind him, watching the yard. Helen clipped a lead to her collar. Lungs sound clear. Keep her quiet tonight and call if the cough returns. Ray stood where Sadie could see his face. Come on, girl. His voice was lower than it had been at the clinic. Sadie stepped down slowly. Toby tumbled after her, then found his feet and pulled toward the familiar porch. Sadie did not follow at once. She smelled the repaired gate, walked its length, and pressed her nose against the new post. Only then did she enter the enclosure. Ray closed the latch and tested it twice. Helen watched him do it. No running near the river for several days, she said. Ray looked at Sadie. She won't be going near it. Helen did not challenge him, but her eyes moved toward the lower field. Let her tell you what she can handle, she said. Ray's jaw tightened, though he gave a small nod. After Helen left, Toby began dragging an old work glove backward across the yard. Sadie followed him closely, interrupting every few steps to smell his ears and belly. Grant expected Ray to take the dogs inside. Instead, the older man clipped a worn leather lead to Sadie's collar. She always walks the lower boundary before supper, Ray said. Routine will settle her. Grant looked toward the river. Its sound had weakened since the night before, but water still moved hard through the trees. Maybe not today. She knows the path. That doesn't mean she's ready for it. Ray faced him squarely. You going to decide that too? Grant considered his answer. No, she will. Ray gave him a long look, then opened the gate. Toby stayed inside the enclosure with a shallow bowl of softened food. Sadie followed Ray across the yard, her body close to his leg. Grant walked several paces behind them. The usual path descended toward the lower field, crossed the shallow runoff channel, and curved along the riverbank before returning to the house. The shed where Toby had been trapped stood farther downstream. Sadie reached the top of the descent and stopped. Ray gave the lead a light pull. She lowered her body. "Come on," he said. Sadie's tail dropped and shifted left. Her breathing quickened. She looked toward the trees where the sound of the river rose between the trunks. Ray took another step. Sadie did not. "She has walked this path every day for years," he said. Grant kept his voice even. Yesterday wasn't every day. Ray pulled once more, not hard enough to hurt her, but enough to tighten the lead. Sadie backed away. For a moment, frustration crossed Ray's face. Grant recognized it. The dog's refusal threatened more than the walk. It suggested that the life Ray expected to resume had not returned unchanged. "We can force her down," Grant said, "but then we won't know whether she chose the path or only gave up resisting us." Ray looked at him sharply. Grant did not take the lead. After several seconds, Ray relaxed his hand. The leather line sagged. Sadie lifted her head. She smelled the air, turned away from the river, and walked toward an old service track climbing the hillside. "That route adds nearly a mile," Ray said. Grant looked at the dog. Sadie had stopped and was waiting. Ray muttered under his breath, but he followed. The higher track had not been maintained in years. Grass grew through the center, and fallen leaves covered its edges. Sadie moved more easily there. She still checked the river whenever it became louder, but she no longer flattened herself to the ground. Halfway up the slope, she left the track and stepped onto a narrow shelf above the county road. Ray called her back. Sadie stopped near a patch of mud where no rainwater should have remained. She smelled the ground, moved 3 feet to the side, and continued uphill. Ray did not. He stared at the wet patch. Grant came beside him. "What is it?" Ray pressed the heel of his boot into the soil. Brown water rose around the edge. "This shelf drains east," he said. "That water is coming from the west." He moved farther along the bank. Beneath a layer of leaves, a thin line of muddy water seeped from the slope and crossed toward the road below. Ray used a fallen branch to clear the leaves from a shallow depression. The water beneath them was moving, not standing. "There's an old cross drain under the road," he said, "installed before the pavement was widened." "Blocked?" "Maybe. Or the inlet shifted when the bank moved." Grant crouched carefully, protecting his knee. Below them, the county road curved toward the wooden bridge. A fresh scar of exposed clay ran along the lower shoulder. He opened the waterproof notebook from his jacket pocket. At the bridge, he had recorded vibration in the western approach and a shallow depression near the first timber support. He had treated both as storm effects. From this angle, they formed a line with the seepage beneath Ray's boot. Grant drew the road, the slope, and the probable drain position. "If water is crossing under here," he said, "it could be feeding the approach fill." Ray pointed beyond the bend. "And if the old outlet is buried, pressure will keep finding somewhere else to go." "Where does that road lead?" "Senior residences on the Upper Valley Road, 26 units, one way in during winter." Grant looked down at the erosion again. Sadie had not discovered a culvert. She had simply refused the route that frightened her and chosen higher ground. Ray's experience had given meaning to what they saw there. Grant photographed the seepage, marked the location, and called Marlene Boyd. The county supervisor answered on the 4th ring. Grant explained the gate, the high route, the muddy seepage, and the possible connection to the bridge approach. Marlene did not accept the conclusion immediately. "Photographs and coordinates," she said. "I also want the original culvert map before anyone touches the road." Ray worked this valley for almost 30 years. He knows where the old drain runs. "That is useful history. It is not a current inspection." I understand. I can meet you both there tomorrow morning. Grant looked at Ray. The older man was standing with Sadie beside him, one hand resting near the bent tip of her left ear. I'll have Ray's information ready, Grant said. I can present it for him. Ray's hand dropped from Sadie's neck. No. Grant covered the phone. What? I said no. Marlene needs the history. Then she can ask me. I'm trying to keep this simple. For you. Grant stared at him. Ray took Sadie's lead and turned toward the high path home. You wanted me to tell you what I knew, he said. You never said you planned to take my place when it mattered. He walked away before Grant could answer. Sadie followed him without hesitation. Grant Callahan left Ray Pike's property before sunset, but the old man's final words followed him down the valley road. You wanted what I knew. You never said you planned to take my place when it mattered. Grant had intended to finish the bridge report that night. Instead, he stopped at Helen Avery's clinic to return the dry blanket she had loaned him for Toby. Helen was closing the examination rooms, still wearing her sage-colored scrubs beneath a field jacket. How are the dogs? She asked. Home. The gate is fixed. And Ray? Angry. Helen folded the blanket once and placed it on the counter. At the gate? At me. Grant explained the seepage on the hillside, Ray's knowledge of the old cross drain, and the inspection Marlene Boyd had scheduled for the following morning. He also repeated what he had told Marlene, that he could present Ray's information for him. Helen listened without interrupting. When he finished, she said, Did Ray ask you to do that? No. Then you weren't making the meetings easier for him. You were making him unnecessary. Grant looked toward the dark clinic windows. He walks out when he thinks people aren't listening. He may. The county still needs the information. Yes. So what am I supposed to do? Helen picked up the clinic keys. Ask him how he wants to give it. The answer was too simple to argue with. Grant returned to Ray's house the next morning before the county crew arrived. He wore his green camouflage field shirt beneath a canvas jacket, with his waterproof notebook in one chest pocket. Ray was already outside in a brown work coat and olive canvas vest. Sadie stood beside him. Toby remained inside the repaired enclosure, pulling an old glove backward through the damp grass. Ray saw Grant but continued checking the gate latch. Grant stopped several feet away, directly in front of him. I was wrong yesterday. Ray gave the latch another pull. About the gate or me? Both. That earned Grant his full attention. I plan to use your knowledge, Grant said, without asking how you wanted it presented. I told myself I was saving time. You usually save time by taking over? More often than I should. Ray looked toward the road. Marlene coming. At 9. And if I say no, then I tell her you declined. I still submit what I personally observed, but I don't attach your name or your conclusions. Ray studied him for several seconds. Grant did not fill the silence. Finally, Ray said, If I come, people face me when they speak, one person at a time. If my name goes in the report, I hear the sentence before it stays there. All right. And you don't translate me unless I ask. All right. Ray clipped Sadie's lead to her collar. I'm not promising to stay if they start talking over one another. I understand. No, Ray said. You understand the words. We'll see about the rest. At 9, 2 county vehicles stopped beside the upper road. Marlene Boyd stepped from the first one carrying a gray aluminum clipboard, marked with a strip of olive tape. She was 63, with a steady posture, short black hair silvering at both temples, and the patient expression of someone who did not confuse urgency with haste. A younger county technician followed with measuring equipment and flags, but was introduced only as part of Marlene's field crew. Marlene looked first at Grant, then at Ray. Mr. Pike, I understand you worked this district. 28 years. I also understand the culvert records are incomplete. They were incomplete when I worked here. The technician glanced up, unsure whether Ray was joking. Marlene did not smile. Then we verify everything we can. Ray nodded once. That is what you should do. Marlene divided the work before anyone entered the slope. Grant would handle access safety, settlement measurements, and photographs. The technician would check moisture, outlet conditions, and elevations. Ray would identify historical drainage routes and previous repairs. Marlene alone would decide what entered the county's official findings. No one touches the roadbed without my approval, she said. No one calls a suspicion a failure until we confirm it. Ray looked at Grant. I like her. Marlene heard him. That may not last. They began at the bridge approach. Grant showed the shallow depression he had recorded before the storm and the exposed clay along the western shoulder. Ray pointed toward the slope above. That fill was widened in the late 90s, he said. The old cross drain stayed underneath because replacing it would have closed the road for a week. Marlene turned so Ray could see her face. Did you install it? No, I repaired the outlet twice. Dates? Not exact. Once after the ice storm. Again the year the church roof came off. The technician searched the county maintenance index. Neither event gave a precise year, but together they narrowed the records enough to locate an old work order. Marlene marked it on her clipboard. She did not praise Ray. She used what he gave her and checked it. That seemed to matter more. They moved uphill along the higher service track Sadie had chosen the day before. The dog walked close to Ray until the river sounded through the trees. Then she shifted farther inland, keeping her body between Ray and the slope. Ray allowed the lead to remain loose. At the muddy seepage point, Grant showed Marlene the photographs and coordinates. The surface had dried since the previous afternoon, leaving only a dark stain in the leaves. The technician pressed a moisture probe into the ground. Higher than the surrounding bank, he said, but not enough to prove a leak. Ray pointed downhill. Check the outlet before you decide what the bank is doing. Marlene looked toward the brush below. Can we reach it safely? Grant examined the grade and selected a line that avoided the fresh erosion. He placed 2 temporary markers and led the technician down, while Marlene and Ray stayed above. Sadie followed Ray to the edge of the safe area, then stopped. A faint sound came from beneath the road, not the broad rush of the river, but a thin, uneven hiss. Sadie tilted her head to the right. After a moment, she stepped sideways and chose a wider path around the apparently dry ground. Ray watched her, then smelled the air. Wet clay, he said. Marlene looked at him. From where? Below us. Water is moving under pressure. That is a possibility, she said. Not a finding. Then find it. Grant and the technician reached the lower shoulder. The old outlet was hidden beneath leaves, vines, and a shallow slide of soil. They cleared the vegetation by hand until the rusted edge of a metal pipe appeared. Very little water came through it. Grant touched the surrounding earth. It vibrated faintly beneath his glove. Outlet is restricted, he called. Marlene authorized them to clear only the loose material covering the pipe mouth. They removed leaves and several small branches. Muddy water pushed through in a sudden stream, then settled into a steady flow. Above them, the technician's moisture reading began to drop. The cross drain was not completely collapsed, but it was close to blocked. Water had been backing into the road fill and finding new paths through the slope. Marlene recorded the result. Ray said nothing. Grant climbed back to the track. You were right about the pressure. Ray looked at Marlene. Is that going in the report? The verified condition is going in, she said. Your history helped us find it. That is not the same sentence. No, it is the accurate one. Ray considered that, then nodded. By noon, Marlene had enough evidence to order temporary work within her authority. The crew cleared the accessible obstruction installed a simple water-level marker near the inlet, and placed warning signs at both approaches. The county would monitor rainfall and close the road if water reached a marked threshold. A full replacement would require engineering review, emergency funding, and equipment that could not be brought in immediately. "So we watch it until the budget catches up?" Ray asked. "We reduce the risk while I request the repair," Marlene said. "Those are not the same thing." Ray pointed toward the old logging road on the upper slope. "If the lower road closes, that track reaches the high shoulder above the bend." Marlene studied the route. "Vehicle access?" "Not for a bus. Maybe a rescue truck if the upper washout is still shallow." Grant added, "We can survey it for foot access and rope support." Marlene approved a limited inspection. The old track proved rough but passable on foot. Grant marked 2 stable anchor locations. Ray identified one section where the bank had been reinforced years earlier. The technician confirmed the ground remained firm. At the upper overlook, Ray pointed toward a cluster of low buildings beyond the trees. "Senior residences," he said. 26 units. Their shuttle uses this road Tuesdays and Fridays." Marlene lowered her clipboard. "That route isn't listed in the county emergency contact sheet." "It should be." She called the residence office from the site, confirmed the schedule, and added the manager and driver to the temporary closure plan. The information changed the consequences. A blocked road would not merely inconvenience nearby homeowners. It could trap a vehicle carrying people who could not safely climb the slope without help. Before leaving, Marlene read the field summary aloud while facing Ray. When she reached the paragraph describing the historical drain, she paused. Mr. Pike identified the probable location based on prior maintenance experience. County inspection then confirmed a restricted outlet and water migration through the road fill. Ray listened to the full sentence. "Keep that." Grant closed his notebook. For once, the work had not become slower because control was shared. It had become more complete. 2 days later, Helen gave Ray the number for a veterans hearing support program. She did not make the call for him. Ray placed it from his own kitchen and scheduled an appointment for the following week. He later asked Grant for a ride because the clinic was outside the valley. Grant said yes, without taking the telephone from his hand. Over the next 3 weeks, the water marker remained below the closure line. The county inspected the drain after every significant rain. Marlene submitted the replacement request, but approval had not yet arrived. Then a new storm front crossed the mountains earlier than forecast. By mid-afternoon, rain was running across the upper road in silver sheets. The water marker rose past the threshold, and Marlene ordered the route closed. The residence manager answered on the first call. The shuttle had already left. It was carrying several older residents home from their weekly appointments, and it was approaching the valley from the far side of the closure. Sadie began pacing before Ray Pike heard the first emergency call. Rain hammered the metal roof of his house and ran in sheets across the yard. Toby slept near the kitchen stove, but Sadie moved between the back door and the hallway, leading toward the higher side of the property. Each time the river sounded through the valley, she stopped, listened, and turned away from the door facing the low field. Ray watched her make the same circuit 3 times. The water did not sound like ordinary runoff. It had a deeper, uneven force, as if it were striking something that had not been in its path before. He switched on the weather scanner beside the kitchen window. The first transmission was broken by static. The second was clear enough. A shuttle carrying older residents had stopped on County Road 12 near Marker 17. A small slide blocked the road behind it. Water was crossing the pavement ahead. The driver had kept everyone inside and called 911. Ray reached for the marked drainage map on this table. Marker 17 sat below the slope they had inspected 3 weeks earlier. Sadie followed him to the coat hook. When he lifted his brown rain jacket, she moved toward the door with him. Then the river gave another low roar. She stopped. Her tail dropped. Her breathing quickened. Ray rested one hand on the latch. Before the bridge accident, he would have opened the door and expected her to follow. Sadie had gone everywhere with him for years. Part of him still wanted that familiar proof that nothing between them had changed. Instead, he crouched in front of her. "You stay here." Sadie looked past him toward the rain. Ray did not pull her collar or repeat the command louder. He guided her and Toby into the room on the uphill side of the house, placed water beside them, and checked both window latches. Sadie remained near the doorway, watching him. "I know where you are," he said. He closed the inner gate, then called Marlene Boyd. She answered from the county operations vehicle. "Tell me exactly what you know," she said. "The shuttle is near marker 17. That puts it below the old cross drain and above the lower bend. If water is crossing in front of the vehicle, the road fill may already be taking pressure from the west side." "Can you reach the site?" "Not safely from my road." "Then don't try. Bring the old maintenance map to the command post at the church lot. Stay on the upper route." Ray looked through the window at Sadie. "I'm on my way." Grant Callahan received Marlene's call while checking warning signs at the western road closure. He was less than 2 miles from the church lot, with his rope access equipment still secured in the truck. By the time he arrived, the volunteer fire department had established a temporary command point under a canopy beside the church parking area. An ambulance waited on the higher shoulder. Rain blurred the red emergency lights against the gray afternoon. The fire chief was a broad man in his late 50s, with a white helmet and a voice that carried without sounding hurried. He had already spoken with the shuttle driver by phone. 7 passengers and 1 driver, he told the group. 2 use canes. 1 is on portable oxygen. No one is injured. The driver says the bus is level, but the shoulder on the riverside looks soft. Marlene stood beside the hood of her county vehicle, her aluminum clipboard protected beneath a clear cover. Ray spread the old drainage map beside her. "The lower access is blocked here," Marlene said, pointing to the reported slide. "The upper logging track was inspected 3 weeks ago for foot access only." The chief looked at Grant. "You worked that track?" "I marked 2 possible anchor points above the road. Both were stable at the time. They need to be checked again before anyone loads them." "You have current rope access certification." Grant handed him the card from his wallet. The chief read it, then returned it. "You work under my rescue officer. You don't move ahead of the team." "Understood." Years earlier, Grant might have heard the sentence as unnecessary. He would have believed competence should be obvious enough to create authority. This time, he simply put on his helmet. Ray pointed to a faded line on this map. "The old logging track reaches a shelf above marker 17. It avoids the slide, but the last 100 yards narrow near the outlet." The chief turned toward him so Ray could see his face. "Have you walked it recently?" 3 weeks ago from the north side. "Any known washouts?" "One shallow cut near the top. The ground below it was firm then." "That is history," the chief said. "Useful, but not a guarantee." Ray nodded. "Agreed." A 2-person fire crew went ahead to inspect the upper route. Grant followed only after the rescue officer authorized him to carry the rope bags to the first anchor point. The logging track was slick but passable. Rainwater moved along its wheel ruts, and branches hung low beneath the weight of wet leaves. The crew tested each section before bringing equipment forward. At the upper shelf, they could see the shuttle through the trees. It sat across the lane at a slight angle, its hazard lights blinking. Mud and branches covered the road behind it. Ahead, brown water crossed the pavement in a wide, shallow sheet. The driver remained inside with the passengers, exactly as instructed. Grant checked the first anchor tree. Its root base was firm, but water had begun cutting a channel several feet below it. "Not this one," he told the rescue officer. The second anchor, farther uphill, stood on rockier ground. The fire crew inspected it, backed it with a second tree, and approved the system. Grant helped establish a guideline down the slope. He did not decide the evacuation order. The fire chief, after consulting the ambulance crew and driver, chose to move the passenger using oxygen first, followed by those needing canes, then the remaining passengers and driver. A firefighter reached the shuttle from above, secured the door area, and explained the procedure to those inside. No one was asked to cross the moving water. Each person would climb the short slope with a firefighter on either side, and the guideline available for balance. The first passenger emerged wearing a clear rain poncho over a red sweater. She held the oxygen bag against her chest and looked up at the steep track. "I can't make that," she said. The firefighter beside her did not offer false reassurance. "We're going 10 feet at a time." Grant remained above the steepest section, managing slack under the rescue officer's direction. When the woman stopped halfway, no one pulled her forward. The firefighters gave her time to breathe, then moved again. She reached the ambulance walking on her own feet. The second passenger came with a cane. The third needed both hands on the line. The work was slow, but the system held. At the command post below the church, Ray listened to the radio traffic. He could not see the shuttle from there, only the upper slope and the muddy water leaving the valley. Marlene stood beside him. A narrow stream had been flowing from the old outlet near the bend. At first, the water was brown from the storm. Then its color changed. A heavier wave of pale clay pushed from the pipe. Ray leaned closer to the field glasses. "That outlet should be clearing," he said. "Not getting thicker." Marlene looked through the glasses. "What does it mean?" "The water is cutting fresh fill. It may be finding the road shoulder instead of staying inside the pipe." "Are you certain?" "No." Ray pointed to the lower edge of the pavement. "But if that muddy line widens, move them uphill." Marlene radioed the observation to the fire chief. She did not order. The rescue changed herself. The chief sent a firefighter to inspect the shoulder from the safe side. The report came back moments later. Fresh cracks had appeared near the river edge. The chief halted movement. Grant was beside the guideline when the order reached him. "Shift the system 10 feet uphill," the rescue officer said. The current setup was working. 4 passengers had already reached safety. Moving it would cost time. Grant looked down at the shuttle. 3 passengers and the driver remained. He also saw the crack opening along the lower shoulder. "Copy," he said. No argument. No attempt to prove the current line could hold. The team unloaded the first anchor, carried the line uphill, and rebuilt the lower section around a firmer route. The delay lasted less than 7 minutes, though it felt longer in the rain. The next passenger was an older man with a silver cane. He paused beside Grant near the top. "Bus still there?" he asked. "Yes." "My wife's inside." "She's next." The man tightened his grip on the cane. "Then don't let them leave me where I can't see her." Grant moved him to a position beneath the canopy where the shuttle door remained visible through the trees. The woman came out next. Her husband raised one hand when she reached the slope. She lifted hers in return. The final passenger followed. Then the driver shut down the vehicle, took the passenger list from the dashboard, and climbed out with the firefighter. She was halfway up when the road shoulder moved. It did not collapse with a dramatic roar. The edge simply lowered, cracked, and slid several feet toward the river. The shuttle tilted on its right side, but remained on the pavement. The driver looked back. "Keep moving," the firefighter told her. She did. When she reached the upper shelf, she handed the passenger list to the chief. He checked every name against the people at the ambulance area. All 8 were accounted for. No one had suffered more than cold, fatigue, and a few strained muscles. Ray remained at the command post until the chief announced the rescue complete. Only then did he fold the old map. Marlene looked at him. "Your outlet warning changed the route before the shoulder moved." The firefighter confirmed the crack, and Grant's team moved the line. "And the driver kept the passengers inside," Marlene nodded. "That is how the report will read." The county closed the road completely. By evening, crews had diverted surface water and stabilized the upper edge with temporary barriers. The shuttle remained below until heavy equipment could remove it safely. 2 days later, Marlene met Grant and Ray at the church lot. The rain had passed, leaving the mountains cold and clear. The county approved emergency replacement of the cross drain and stabilization of the slope, she said. Engineering starts next week. Ray folded his arms. Good. I also want you involved. He gave her a flat look. For what? Historical drainage routes, previous repairs, locations that never made it into the digital records. You want an old man standing beside a map while someone takes a picture? I want a paid consultant who signs his own work. Ray's expression did not soften. I spent years being useful before people noticed I was old, he said. I'm not interested in becoming useful only because they noticed. Marlene closed her clipboard. Then read the terms before you decide. Ray did not take the document she offered. Not yet. Ray Pike left the church parking lot without taking the contract Marlene Boyd had offered him. 3 days later, he walked into the county public works office carrying the same aluminum slope gauge he had used at the gate. His hearing device had been adjusted at the Veterans Clinic that morning, and for the first time in months, he could hear the low hum of the building's ventilation system without a whistle cutting through it. Grant Callahan came with him, but Ray carried his own folder. Marlene met them in a small conference room overlooking the equipment yard. Rolled drainage plans covered one end of the table. The emergency project had moved quickly by county standards, though not magically. Engineers had surveyed the damaged road. Purchasing staff had located pipe large enough for the replacement, and the county board had approved limited emergency funding before the first hard freeze. The road was still closed. Temporary barriers diverted surface water away from the damaged shoulder, and residents in the upper valley were using a longer route while work was prepared. Marlene placed the proposed consulting agreement in front of Ray. He read the first page without speaking. The contract offered hourly pay for identifying historical drainage routes, reviewing past repairs, and attending site meetings when requested. It also stated that current engineers and county supervisors retained all legal authority. Ray reached the second page and tapped one paragraph. This says I may be consulted. Yes. That could mean somebody calls after the decision is already made. Marlene leaned forward so he could see her face. What language would you use? Historical drainage changes should be reviewed with me before excavation plans are finalized. You cannot approve excavation. I didn't ask to. Grant watched the exchange without joining it. Ray continued. I want the hourly rate written here, not attached in another document. Travel time included. And if you use my name in a report, I receive the section before it is filed. Marlene made notes on her clipboard. You came prepared, she said. I came to work. She looked at Grant. Any concerns? Grant shook his head. It is his agreement. Ray glanced at him, then returned to the contract. Marlene revised the language that afternoon. Ray signed only after reading every change. He was not made an engineer, inspector, or county officer. He became a paid consultant with a defined scope and the right to speak for his own work. It was less dramatic than a public ceremony. It was also more useful. The replacement project began the following week. Heavy equipment removed the damaged section of road, exposing the old cross drain beneath layers of fill. The metal pipe had not completely collapsed. Its outlet had narrowed over years of sediment, roots, and small repairs that redirected water without solving the larger problem. Ray stood behind the marked safety line in an olive canvas vest and white hard hat. He showed the county engineer where an older ditch had once carried overflow toward the east. The engineer checked the grade before changing the plan. Sometimes Ray was right. Once, he remembered the position of an old retaining wall incorrectly by nearly 20 feet. When the survey stakes proved it, he frowned, checked the map again, and said, "Use the stakes." No one needed him to be perfect in order for him to remain valuable. Grant spent most of those days documenting the bridge approach and helping Marlene organize winter inspections. The work could have ended with his final storm report. His contract had been for a limited evaluation, and the cabin waited at the end of each day exactly as it had before. Quiet. Ordered. Entirely his. Marlene found him one afternoon beside the equipment trailer, checking a box of reflective markers. "I need someone to coordinate the winter route inspections," she said. "I already inspect the bridges." "You inspect your assigned sites. I need someone to organize the schedule, confirm backups, and make sure information does not stay in one truck or one notebook." Grant closed the box. "That sounds like an office job." "It is partly an office job. I'm not interested in supervising people who already know their work." "Good. I am not asking you to." She handed him a one-page description. The role included assigning inspection pairs, maintaining shared route records, and confirming that every worker had authority to stop an inspection when conditions changed. Grant read the page twice. The old version of him would have accepted only if final control remained in his hands, or he would have refused, telling himself that working alone was cleaner and safer. He pointed to the section on route assignments. "No one works a flood site without a second person." Marlene wrote it down. "All measurements go into the shared file before the end of the shift," he continued. "Not just my notebook." She added that too. "And every assignment needs a named backup. If one person cannot make it, the route does not simply disappear." Marlene looked up. "Anything else?" Grant thought about the line above the shuttle, the anchor that had still been holding when the fire chief ordered them to move it. "Anyone on the team can call a stop," he said. "They do not have to wait for me to agree." Marlene held his gaze for a moment. "That is the job," Grant signed. The change did not make him more talkative. He still preferred early mornings, written plans, and tools returned to the same place. But now, when an inspection ended, another person knew what he had seen. If his knee prevented him from reaching a slope, someone else could perform the work without asking permission to be competent. Ray changed more slowly. The adjusted hearing device helped, but it did not solve every conversation. At the first project meeting, 2 people spoke at once near the end of the table. Ray's face tightened. Grant saw the old anger rising. Ray lifted one hand. "I lost that," he said. "One at a time." The room became quiet. The engineer repeated the question while facing him. Ray answered, and the meeting continued. No one congratulated him for asking. That mattered too. As the road work progressed, people began stopping at Ray's house. Not many, and not all at once. One neighbor brought a bent section of gutter and asked where runoff should be directed before winter. Ray pointed out the grade, then handed the man a shovel instead of doing the work for him. Another came to borrow a pipe wrench. Ray made him sign the date on a piece of cardboard tacked inside the shed. A woman from the upper road arrived with coffee and a photograph of a ditch filling near her driveway. Ray told her it was probably leaves, not a failed culvert, and advised her to call the county if the water crossed the pavement. Sometimes he helped. Sometimes he said no. The visits continued because people wanted his judgment, not because they were checking whether he had eaten. Sadie returned to a routine of her own. Each afternoon, Ray clipped on her lid and opened the repaired gate. Toby, growing quickly but still awkward in his feet and ears, remained in the enclosure with his old glove. Ray no longer led Sadie toward the low river path. He waited. Some days, she chose the high-service road without looking back. On others, she stopped where the sound of the river reached through the trees. Ray stood beside her with the lead loose. If she turned home, they went home. If she took one step closer, he took one with her. She never again had to enter the water to prove what she loved. By early winter, the new cross drain was in place. The outlet had been widened, the shoulder rebuilt, and a separate overflow channel carried excess water away from the bridge approach. Marlene reopened the road only after the engineer signed the inspection. There were no speeches at the barricade. A county truck removed the final sign. The shuttle driver crossed the repaired section slowly, tested her brakes on the far side, and continued toward the residences. The work held. On the first cold Saturday after the road reopened, Grant heard a knock at his cabin door. Ray stood on the porch in a faded olive chore jacket and knit cap. He carried 2 paper cups of coffee in one hand. Sadie waited beside him. Toby sat several feet behind, holding an old work glove by 2 fingers of leather. "I need 2 galvanized bolts," Ray said. Grant looked at the cups. "Is that the payment?" "Deposit." "What are the bolts for?" "Rain shield over the dog run. The old ones are rusting." Grant brought out a divided hardware box and placed it on the porch rail. He did not choose the bolts for Ray. Ray examined 3 sizes, measured one against the width of his thumb, and selected 2. "I'll return what I don't use. You took 2. I may return 1. Grant accepted the coffee. Sadie walked to the edge of the clearing, where the high path curved above the river. She stopped when the water became audible. The bent tip of her left ear moved. Her tail stayed low but loose. Toby dropped the glove and waited behind her. After a few seconds, Sadie chose the upper trail. Ray closed the hardware box. "You coming?" Grant looked back into the cabin. His waterproof notebook lay on the table beside the winter inspection schedule. Nothing required his attention for another hour. He locked the door. As he stepped from the porch, Sadie returned, caught the edge of his glove gently between her teeth, and released it. Then she moved back to Ray's side. Grant joined them on the high trail. Ray carried the bolts. Grant carried one of the coffees. Toby carried the glove until he became distracted by a leaf and dropped it again. The river could still be heard below them, but no one asked Sadie to take the shorter road. There was work waiting at Ray's house. Nothing urgent. Nothing heroic. Just a rain shield, 2 galvanized bolts, and enough hands to do the job without one person carrying all of it. Sometimes the kindest thing we can do is not take over, but stand beside someone long enough for their own strength to be seen again. Grant learned to share responsibility. Ray learned that accepting help did not mean surrendering his independence, and Sadie reminded them both that healing begins when fear is respected, not forced aside. In our own lives, grace may look just as ordinary: listening before judging, asking before acting, or letting someone choose the road they are ready to walk. What did this story mean to you? Share your thoughts in the comments and subscribe if you would like to hear more stories about courage, dignity, and the quiet choices that bring people together. May God give you wisdom to know when to help, patience to know when to wait, and peace for the road ahead.